The first knock came from something too large to be asking permission. Ivy Marlow froze with her spoon halfway to her mouth. Outside her cottage, snow scraped across the door. Then came a second impact, weaker than the first, followed by the heavy collapse of a body against the wood. She reached for the fire poker and opened the door 3 inches. A black wolf lay in the snow, not merely large, enormous. Wet fur clung to a frame built to terrify grown alphas, yet his ribs showed beneath his coat. His silver eyes lifted toward Ivy, sharp with intelligence and dulled by exhaustion. Behind her sat the last pot of stew she could afford until week's end. The wolf looked past her, at the fire, then at the pot. Ivy should have shut the door. Instead, she whispered, "You have terrible timing. Where are you listening from tonight? Tell me in the comments so I know we have not lost each other along the way. Stay with me until the end, because the reason this wolf came to Ivy's door will change what she believes about being wanted." She carried the chipped blue bowl to the table and divided her stew exactly in half. "That is tomorrow's dinner," she told him. "So if you bite me, I am going to be extremely offended." The wolf limped inside. He sniffed the bowl once before eating. Too fast at first, then strangely slowly. Ivy noticed the trembling in his forelegs stop. His breathing eased. Something in the room changed with it. The fire did not grow brighter, yet warmth pressed softly against the cottage walls. The wolf raised his head. For one impossible second, Ivy had the uncomfortable feeling that he was studying her, not like an animal waiting for more food, like a man trying to remember her face. "You are welcome," she murmured. His ears shifted. Ivy almost smiled. Then she touched the bowl. The ceramic was warm. Her fingers were ice cold. She pulled her hand back and frowned. That made no sense. The cottage was warmer than it had been all week, yet a chill was crawling beneath her skin. The wolf noticed. His silver gaze dropped to her trembling fingers, then his entire body went rigid. Outside, somewhere beyond the trees, a distant horn sounded. Once, then twice, the wolf's silver eyes snapped toward the door. A low growl rolled from his chest, and the calm, starving creature beside Ivy's hearth suddenly looked like something dangerous was hunting him. By the next evening, Ivy had convinced herself the black wolf would not return. That should have been a relief. Instead, she caught herself listening for him while stirring the thinnest stew she had ever made. There was more water than broth, more turnip than meat, and definitely not enough for 2. Ivy stared at the chipped blue bowl on the table. Ridiculous. The cottage answered with silence. She ladled herself a small portion and sat near the fire. 3 bites later, something scratched once against the door. Ivy stopped chewing. A second scratch followed, not desperate, almost polite. She opened the door. The giant black wolf sat in the snow. His fur was cleaner than the night before. His ribs were still visible, but less sharply now, and his silver eyes were unmistakably alert. Ivy looked at him, then at the pot behind her. No. The wolf waited. "You cannot simply appear every night because I fed you once." His ears lifted. That was charity. He continued staring. Ivy narrowed her eyes. "You understand that word?" The wolf stepped inside. Ivy sighed. "Of course you do." She split the stew again. This time, when she placed the bowl on the floor, the wolf did not eat immediately. He looked at her portion, then at his, then back at her. "What?" He nudged his bowl toward her. Ivy blinked. No. He nudged it again. Something warm and painful moved through her chest. "You are hungry." The wolf sat down. "So am I." He lowered his head. Ivy stared at him for several seconds. Then she pushed half his portion back. There, we are both equally irresponsible. Only then did he eat. Ivy watched him from across the table. You need a name. The wolf paused. I cannot keep calling you wolf. His expression seemed offended. Oh, forgive me. Giant, terrifying creature with expensive manners. His tail moved once. Ivy smiled. Night. The wolf tilted his head. Because you keep appearing after dark. He considered this. Night. His ears moved forward. Fine. That is settled. For the next 4 evenings, Night came back. Always after sunset. Always alone. Always to the same door. On the 3rd night, he arrived carrying a rabbit. Ivy opened the door and stared at the animal hanging from his jaws. You brought dinner. Night dropped the rabbit at her feet. It was cleanly caught. No unnecessary damage. Ivy looked at him. You realize this makes us friends. He stepped past her. Apparently that was not a question. She cooked the rabbit slowly with onions and the last of her dried herbs. For the first time in weeks, the cottage smelled like a real meal. Night lay beside the hearth while Ivy worked. She talked because silence felt strange now. At first, she told him useless things, which cupboard door never closed properly, why the chimney smoked when the wind came from the north, how Mrs. Pell from the edge of Frostpine always cheated when measuring flour. Night listened to everything. Then Ivy made the mistake of mentioning Corvin Rusk. The wolf's head rose instantly. Ivy noticed. You know that name. A low sound moved through Night's chest, not a growl at her, at the name. Ivy set down the knife. Alpha Corvin. Night's lips pulled back. Well, she leaned against the table. That makes 2 of us. He cast me out. Night's gaze fixed on her. Not because I stole anything or attacked anyone. She stirred slowly. I argued. One ear twitched. I know. Shocking. Ivy laughed without humor. Apparently asking where the food went was dangerous. Night stood. He crossed the cottage and rested his head against her knee. Ivy stopped breathing. The gesture was so simple that it nearly broke her. She placed one hand between his ears. You should not do that. He did not move. I might start thinking you like me. His eyes closed. The pressure behind Ivy's ribs softened. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to give when you believe nobody will stay long enough to ask anything back? Ivy had built her whole life around that kind of giving. If you have ever been the one who always shares first, you probably understand why receiving can feel more frightening than generosity. Night remained until dawn. When Ivy woke, he was gone. On the table lay 2 field mice and a half-frozen apple. She stared. Your shopping skills need work. The next night, Night returned with a pheasant. The night after that, nothing. No scratch. No silver eyes outside the door. Ivy waited until the stew burned. Then another hour. She told herself the wolf had gone where wolves belonged. Maybe he had found his pack. Maybe he had recovered. Maybe some sensible creature had finally fed him enough that he no longer needed a stubborn omega with a leaking roof. Ivy took the chipped bowl from the shelf. She almost put it down again. Instead, she filled it with water and left it beside the door. For tomorrow, she said. There was no one to hear. The following evening, Night returned just before the first snowstorm. He looked worse, not thinner, stranger. He stood outside the cottage as if he had forgotten why he came. Night? No response. His silver eyes were nearly black. Ivy stepped toward him. He backed away. That frightened her. You know me. Night's breathing came hard. His legs trembled. Ivy extended one hand. Come inside. Nothing. She tried again. You brought me an apple terrible enough to qualify as an insult. One ear moved. Ivy smiled weakly. There you are. Knight staggered forward. The moment he crossed the threshold, his body sagged. Ivy caught his neck. Cold tore through her palms. Not winter cold. Something deeper. Her knees nearly buckled. She dragged him toward the hearth. Stay with me. Knight collapsed beside the fire. Ivy pressed both hands into his fur. The room changed. Heat pulled inward. The flames bent sharply toward them. Though no wind entered the cottage, Ivy's breath turned white. Knight stopped shaking. She started. What is this? He opened one silver eye. Ivy's fingers had gone numb. She pulled them away. Immediately, Knight's breathing worsened. She touched him again. His body eased. Her own teeth began to chatter. Ivy understood enough to be afraid. Every time he became warmer, she became colder. Still, she kept her hands on him. Knight tried to move away. No. He pushed weakly against her wrist. I said no. His gaze sharpened. You are not the only one allowed to be stubborn. He stopped fighting. Ivy stayed beside him until midnight. When Knight finally slept, she could barely feel her feet. She wrapped herself in 2 blankets and leaned against the hearth. The flames were strong. Her skin remained cold. Without thinking, Ivy whispered something her mother used to say whenever winter stores ran low. A hearth is not measured by how much it keeps, but by who it refuses to leave cold. Knight's eyes opened. His head lifted sharply. Ivy frowned. What? The wolf stared at her. For the first time since she met him, fear appeared in his face. Not fear of danger outside. Fear of recognition. You know that too. Knight rose unsteadily. He walked to the old wooden shelf beside the stove. A soup ladle hung there, carved from dark wood. It had belonged to Ivy's mother. Near the handle were 3 tiny flames surrounding the outline of a house. Knight touched his nose to the carving. Ivy stared. I never noticed you cared about kitchen tools. He looked at her, then at the symbol. A pulse of cold moved through Ivy's chest. Not from the room, from him. Knight suddenly turned toward the door. A distant horn sounded beyond the trees, then another. His body went rigid. Ivy stood. Not again. Knight moved toward the door. This time, Ivy stepped in front of him. No. His eyes narrowed. You disappeared yesterday and came back barely knowing me. He tried to move around her. Ivy blocked him again. You can be offended later. Knight's breathing quickened. Outside, the horn sounded a 3rd time. Closer. Ivy put her hand against his chest. Stay. Something passed between them. Not command, not obedience, recognition. Knight lowered his head. Then, slowly, he stepped back from the door. Ivy exhaled. Thank you. That night, he slept beside the hearth. Ivy fell asleep in the chair. When she woke before dawn, Knight was gone. The cottage door stood open. Snow had blown across the threshold, and beside the chipped blue bowl sat 3 rabbits. Ivy stared at them. A laugh escaped her. You ridiculous creature. Then she noticed her hands. Her fingertips were blue with cold. The fire had burned all night. The room was warm. Ivy was not. By evening, she had convinced herself Knight would return. She made stew. Too much this time. Knight did not come. The stew cooled. Ivy waited. The fire sank. Midnight passed. Still nothing. By morning, snow had erased his tracks. Ivy stood in the doorway holding the chipped bowl. Go home, she whispered. Her chest hurt anyway. The next night, She did not cook. She sat beside the dark window and watched snow fall. Then bells sounded on the road, not hunting horns, carriage bells. Ivy frowned. No carriage came this far into the outer territory in winter. The sound grew louder. Hooves followed. Many. She stood. Through the trees came lanterns, black horses, silver harness, armed riders. At their center rolled a royal carriage bearing the crest of the Northern Vale Dominion. Ivy's stomach dropped. The procession stopped outside her cottage. A guard opened the carriage door. A man stepped into the snow, tall, black-haired, broad-shouldered. He wore no crown. He did not need one. Every soldier lowered his head. The stranger looked directly at Ivy. Silver eyes. Her breath stopped. No. He crossed the clearing alone. Ivy could not move. Those eyes had watched her divide stew. Those eyes had closed beneath her hand. Those eyes had stared at Corvin's name with hatred. The man stopped at her threshold. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then his gaze moved past her, to the kitchen table, to the chipped blue bowl, back to Ivy. His voice was deep, rough, and painfully familiar. Is there any stew left? Ivy stared at the Alpha King standing where her starving wolf should have been, and suddenly understood why Night had always listened like a man. Ivy stared at the man standing on her threshold. Snow gathered across the shoulders of his black coat. Behind him waited royal soldiers, armored riders, and a carriage worth more than Ivy's cottage, land, winter stores, and probably every spoon she had ever owned. But none of that held her attention. His eyes did. Silver. The same impossible silver that had watched her divide a meal she could not afford to share. Evie gripped the door. You. The man's mouth moved slightly. Not quite a smile. Yes. You are Knight. One of the guards behind him looked confused. The Alpha King closed his eyes briefly. Ivy pointed at him. You let me name you Knight. I was unable to correct you. You could understand me. Yes, every word. A pause. Yes. Heat rushed into Ivy's face. She remembered every conversation beside the hearth, every complaint, every insult, the apple, the porridge, Corvin. She remembered telling a giant wolf that powerful men were usually compensating for poor personalities. Ivy wanted the snow to swallow her. You heard everything. I did. Wonderful. She started closing the door. A black-gloved hand stopped it. Not forcefully. Lucian immediately removed his hand. Ivy. Her heart stumbled. He knew her name. Of course he knew her name. She had introduced herself to a wolf, repeatedly. Your Majesty. Something changed in his expression. He did not seem to like the title coming from her. Behind him, a gray-haired woman descended from the carriage carrying a leather medical case. Majesty, we cannot remain exposed. Lucian's gaze stayed on Ivy. May we come inside? Ivy looked past him. There were at least 20 people. My cottage has 4 chairs. Only Dr. Alara and I. The physician raised one hand. Ivy looked at Lucian again. The most powerful alpha in the Northern Vale Dominion was asking permission to enter a cottage he had already slept inside as a wolf. That mattered more than she wanted it to. She stepped aside. Lucian entered. The instant he crossed the threshold, his shoulders lowered, barely. Ivy noticed anyway. Dr. Alara noticed too. The physician stopped just inside the door. Her eyes narrowed. What? Ivy asked. Alara looked around the room. Nothing yet. That was not reassuring. Lucian removed his coat. Without fur, the damage was easier to see. His face was too pale. Dark shadows marked the skin beneath his eyes. His movements carried the controlled stiffness of someone refusing to admit how badly he hurt. Ivy pointed at the chair beside the hearth. "Sit." Lucian sat. Alara stared. Ivy noticed. "What?" The physician blinked. "Nothing. That is twice." Alara almost smiled. Ivy turned toward the stove. "I do have stew." Lucian's gaze followed her. "But it is mostly potatoes. I have survived worse. You ate 2 field mice." Lucian's dignity cracked. Alara looked at him. "You did what?" Lucian's expression became regal enough to freeze rivers. Ivy smiled. "He brought them to me." Alara covered her mouth. "I was poisoned." "That does not explain the apple." Lucian looked away. Ivy laughed. The sound surprised all 3 of them. For one brief moment, the king disappeared. Night returned. Then Lucian's hand began trembling. Ivy saw it. So did Alara. The physician immediately opened her case. "Shirt," Lucian frowned. "Doctor, Majesty." He exhaled and unfastened the top of his shirt. Dark veins crawled beneath the skin near his collarbone. Ivy's amusement vanished. "What is that?" Alara touched the discoloration. Lucian flinched. Frostbane. Ivy had heard the name once, only once, a poison from old pack wars, designed specifically for shifters. Her stomach tightened. "How long?" 6 days since initial exposure. Ivy stared at Lucian. "You came here starving because of poison." Partly, Alara answered. "Frostbane forces a shifter's metabolism into continuous overdrive. The wolf burns everything attempting to purge it. That is why he could not stay fed." "Yes." Ivy looked at the empty shelves. She had thought she was feeding a hungry animal. She had actually been keeping a poisoned man alive. Alara continued. "The later stages are worse." Lucian's jaw tightened. Ivy looked between them. "How much worse?" The physician hesitated. Ivy hated hesitation. "Tell me." Eventually, the boundary between human consciousness and wolf instinct begins collapsing. Ivy remembered Night standing outside her cottage. Black eyes, confused, unable to recognize her. Her skin went cold. "He almost forgot me." Alara turned sharply. "When?" 3 nights ago." Lucian looked at Ivy. "You should have stayed away from me. You came to my door. I could have hurt you, but you did not. You did not know what I was. I knew you needed help." Lucian went silent. Alara studied Ivy. "How did you stabilize him?" "I fed him. That is not enough. I kept him warm." "Also not enough." Ivy crossed her arms. "I apologize for failing to poison him more professionally." Lucian coughed. It sounded suspiciously like hidden laughter. Alara ignored him. "When His Majesty disappeared from our tracking wards, we assumed the Frostbane had destroyed his consciousness." Lucian said, "It nearly did. Yet every time we located him near this region, his condition improved." Alara walked toward the hearth. She held one hand above the flames, then moved toward the table. Her expression changed. "Ivy?" "What?" "Come here." Ivy approached. Alara touched her wrist. Cold. The physician frowned. "How long have your hands been like this? Since Night started visiting?" Lucian's face hardened. "Ivy." She looked at him. "What? You never told me. You were a wolf." "You talked to me about everything else. That is unfortunately true." Lucian stood, too quickly. His knees nearly failed. Ivy caught his arm. The moment she touched him, warmth vanished from her fingers. Lucian inhaled sharply. The dark veins beneath his collarbone receded. Alara saw it. "Do not move." Ivy froze. The physician came closer. Keep touching him. That is a sentence I was not expecting today." Lucian almost smiled again. Alora watched the dark veins. They continued retreating. At the same time, Ivy's lips began losing color. Lucian immediately pulled away. No, his symptoms returned. Alora stared between them, again. Lucian shook his head. "No, Majesty. She is freezing, and you are dying." Ivy looked at him. "How long?" "Silence," Alora answered, "until tomorrow's winter moonrise." Ivy's stomach dropped. What happens then? If the frostbane reaches the final neurological stage while lunar amplification peaks, His Majesty's wolf may permanently overwhelm his human consciousness. Ivy looked at Lucian, Night, the creature who brought her rabbits, who sat beside the hearth listening to stories, who had returned even when she had almost nothing to offer. "You knew." Lucian nodded. "And you kept coming here?" "Yes." "Why?" Something moved behind his eyes. He looked toward the chipped blue bowl, then away. "Because I could think here." That was not the whole answer. Ivy knew it. Before she could press him, horses sounded outside. Lucian's entire posture changed. King again. A guard entered. "Your Majesty." "What?" "Frostpine riders." Ivy went still. "How many?" 12. "Who leads them?" The guard looked at Ivy before answering. "Alpha Corvin Rusk." Lucian's expression became cold enough to rival the winter outside. Ivy remembered Knight's reaction to Corvin's name. "You know him?" "Yes." "How?" Lucian looked toward the window. "Corvin sits on the Outer Pack Provision Council." Ivy stared. "The council responsible for winter food allocation?" "Yes." The room became very quiet. Ivy thought about missing grain, reduced omega rations, storehouses supposedly empty. Corvin throwing her out after she asked where the food had gone. A knock hit the door. This one did not ask permission. Ivy Marlow. Corvin's voice. Her body reacted before her mind, shoulders tight, stomach hollow. "Old fear," Lucian noticed. He stepped toward the door. Ivy caught his sleeve. "No." He looked at her. "This is my house." Lucian held her gaze, then stepped back. "Choice," again. Ivy opened the door. Corvin stood outside wearing frostpine gray. He was broad, silver-haired, and still carried himself with the confidence of a man who had rarely heard no from anyone beneath his rank. His gaze landed on Ivy, then moved past her. He saw Lucian. Corvin's face changed. Shock, then calculation. He bowed. "Your Majesty." Lucian said nothing. Corvin straightened. "We have been searching for you. I am aware." Corvin's eyes moved to Ivy. "You found shelter here?" "Yes." "With her?" Lucian's expression cooled. "I suggest you choose your next words carefully." Corvin understood the warning. His jaw tightened. "I came for Ivy." No, Ivy spoke before Lucian could. Corvin looked at her. "You remain a Frostpine Omega. You exiled me. Temporary banishment does not dissolve pack jurisdiction. You threw my belongings into the snow. You challenged your alpha publicly. I asked why food was disappearing. Several Frostpine warriors shifted uncomfortably. Corvin's eyes hardened. "This is not the place. It is exactly the place." Ivy stepped outside. Lucian remained behind her. Not in front, Corvin noticed. "You will return to Frostpine." "No." His pupils sharpened. "Do not embarrass yourself." The familiar shame rose. Ivy almost obeyed it. Then she remembered the empty pantry. Families cutting meals. A wolf starving beside her hearth. while someone inside the provision system apparently knew more than they admitted. No. Corvin's alpha presence rolled outward. Snow trembled from nearby branches. The frost pine wolves lowered their heads. Royal guards stiffened. Ivy felt pressure strike her chest. Her knees should have bent. They did not. Corvin frowned. He pushed harder. Come home. The cottage behind Ivy seemed to exhale warmth. The pressure weakened. Corvin's expression changed. Lucian stepped closer to the threshold. His own dominance entered the clearing. Stronger, older, crown dominion. Every frostpine warrior dropped instantly to one knee. Corvin staggered. Royal guards bowed their heads. Ivy remained standing. Lucian stopped. His silver eyes shifted towards her. Confusion appeared. Ilara rushed to the doorway. She looked from Lucian to Ivy, then toward the cottage walls. "What?" Ivy whispered. Ilara did not answer. Corvin saw the hesitation and recovered. "This proves nothing." Lucian's gaze returned to him. "It proves she said no. She is an Omega. She is Ivy." The words struck harder than a command. Corvin's face darkened. "You do not understand what she is." Ivy laughed once. "That makes three of us." Corvin ignored her. "Frostpine law requires subordinate wolves to answer their alpha." Lucian's voice lowered. Crown law recognizes exile as termination of compulsory pack obedience. Corvin went still. "You are invoking royal jurisdiction over a domestic dispute." "No." Lucian stepped beside Ivy. "I am reminding you that she does not belong to you." Something inside Ivy shifted, not because a king defended her, because he did not claim her while doing it. Corvin looked between them. His nostrils flared. Then his expression changed. Recognition. He could smell it, the mate bond. No, Ivy's heart stumbled. Ilara closed her eyes briefly. Corvin stared at Lucian. "She is your mate." Ivy turned. Lucian did not deny it. The world seemed to narrow. "You knew?" "Yes." "How long?" "The first night." Ivy stepped away from him. Anger arrived before wonder. "You knew while I was feeding you?" "Yes." "You knew when you brought me that horrible apple. It was the best one I could find. That is not helping." "I suspected as much." Ivy stared at him. Mate, the word carried too much history. Too many stories about inevitability. Possession disguised as destiny. Lucian seemed to read every thought crossing her face. "The bond changes nothing you do not choose." Corvin scoffed. "You expect anyone to believe an Alpha King would ignore a mate bond." Lucian turned toward him. "I do not require your belief." Then he looked at Ivy. "I require her consent." Silence. Ivy's anger did not disappear, but something beneath it softened. A little. Corvin saw that too. His expression became ugly. "You think this makes you important?" There it was. The voice Ivy remembered. Small. Useless. Omega. She looked at him. "No." Corvin blinked. "I was important before he arrived." Lucian's wolf moved behind his eyes. Pride. Ivy felt it, not through command, through something warmer, the bond. Ilara suddenly crossed the room toward the stove. She stopped beside Ivy's mother's old wooden ladle. 3 flames. A house. Her fingers hovered over the carving. "Where did you get this?" "My mother. What was her name?" "Maeve Marlow." Ilara went pale. Lucian noticed. "Doctor?" Ilara looked at Ivy, then at the cottage, then at the place where Crown Dominion had simply vanished around her. Majesty. "What?" "I need the royal archives." Corvin took one step backward, Tiny, almost invisible, Ivy saw it. So did Lucian. "You recognize the symbol," he said. Corvin's jaw locked. "No." Elara turned. "I did not ask you." The Alpha's face hardened. Lucian stepped toward him. "You know something." Corvin smiled without warmth. "You have less than a day to live, Majesty. I would spend it more carefully." Every sword in the clearing came free. Lucian did not move. Neither did Ivy. But Elara stared at Corvin in horror. Ivy felt the pieces connect. "How do you know?" Corvin said nothing. Ivy stepped closer. "How do you know how long he has?" For the first time since arriving, Corvin Rusk had no answer ready, and behind Ivy the cottage fire suddenly burned silver. The silver fire did not spread. It stood perfectly still inside the hearth, each flame narrow and bright as a blade. Everyone saw it. No one understood it. Corvin recovered first. He stepped backward from the doorway and forced a laugh. Old chimneys do strange things in winter. Dr. Elara looked at him. That was not a chimney. Lucian's gaze never left Corvin. "You knew my deadline." Corvin's jaw tightened. "I know enough about Frostbane to recognize the signs." "From where?" No answer. The royal guards shifted closer. Frostpine warriors remained kneeling in the snow, trapped between Corvin's authority and Lucian's crown dominion. Ivy felt both pressures touching the edge of the cottage, then weakening, again. The room itself seemed to resist them. Elara turned toward Ivy's mother's ladle. 3 flames around a carved house, Maeve Marlow. Ivy's stomach tightened at the sound of her mother's name. "You knew her?" "No." Elara looked ashamed of how quickly she answered. "Not personally." "Then what?" "She appears in a restricted archive." Corvin moved. Only half a step. Lucian noticed. So does he. Elara looked at Corvin. His face emptied. That was enough. Ivy understood something before anyone explained it. Corvin had not only known about Frostbane, he had known about her mother. The realization landed colder than the snow outside. "What did you do to her?" Corvin's eyes snapped toward Ivy. "Nothing." "You are lying." "I knew of her family. That is all." Lucian stepped forward. His voice became quiet. "Then you will explain what you knew." Corvin lifted his chin. "You are dying, Majesty." Ivy felt Lucian go still beside her. Corvin continued. "You have hours, perhaps less. You should spend them protecting your throne, not interrogating me over an Omega's family history." Ivy's hands curled. Lucian's dominance surged. The royal guards bowed lower. Corvin's wolves flattened instinctively. But inside the cottage, the pressure broke apart before it reached Ivy. Elara whispered, "The sanctuary is active." Ivy turned. "The what?" The physician looked at the silver flames. "I think this house is doing more than keeping him warm." Corvin's face changed. Fear, then calculation. He looked toward the road. Ivy saw it. "Who are you waiting for?" "No one." A horn sounded in the distance. Lucian drew in a slow breath. Corvin smiled. Too late. Elias Ward entered the cottage at a run. "Majesty." Riders approaching from the western pass. "How many?" 40, perhaps 50. "Royal?" "No." Corvin's smile widened. "Frostpine?" Elias shook his head. "Mixed insignia." Lucian looked at Corvin. "Council mercenaries." Corvin said nothing. That silence answered everything. Ivy felt anger rise, not because she finally had proof, because people were moving toward her home, carrying weapons while Lucian was barely standing. Her cottage had been ignored for years. Now everyone wanted something from it. Lucian touched her wrist lightly. "Leave." Ivy stared at him. "No, Ivy, no." His expression hardened. "This is not a request." She raised an eyebrow. His face changed immediately. He corrected himself. "It should have been." Despite everything, she almost smiled. Lucian lowered his voice. "Please leave before they reach the clearing." "Where?" "With Alara. Elias can escort you north. And you?" "I stay. You can barely stand. I am still king. That is not the same as being invincible." A flicker of frustration crossed his face. Ivy understood what he was trying to do. Protect her. She also understood the old instinct beneath it. Carry everything alone. Decide for everyone. Exactly what she did in a different form. She shook her head. "If I leave, what happens to the thing keeping Frostbane quiet?" Lucian looked toward the silver hearth. No answer. Alara gave one. His symptoms could accelerate. They will. Lucian turned on her. "You are not helping. I am his doctor." Alara looked at Ivy. "And yours, apparently." Ivy crossed her arms. "There. Decision made." "No," Lucian said. She stepped closer. "Then ask me." He went silent. The horn sounded again. Closer. Ivy held his gaze. "Ask." Lucian's jaw flexed. Then the Alpha King, surrounded by soldiers who would obey him without question, said quietly, "Will you stay?" Ivy looked at the man who had once returned night after night, simply to sit beside her fire. Yes, choice settled between them. Not fate, not command, choice. The first arrows hit the trees 5 minutes later. Royal guards formed a shield wall across the clearing. Frostpine wolves hesitated. Corvin shouted at them, "Defend your territory." No one moved. Lucian looked toward the pack warriors. "You are not required to fight for a crime you were not told about." Corvin's face twisted. "They are my wolves." Ivy looked at him. "There it is." His gaze snapped toward her. "What? The part you never understood." She stepped onto the porch. "They are not grain sacks." Corvin's eyes flashed amber. "They chose this pack, and you chose for them." Another arrow struck the porch rail. Elias shouted, "Inside!" Ivy ducked. Lucian pulled her behind the wall, just as a second arrow buried itself in the doorframe. The metal tip hissed. Alara went pale. Frostbane. Lucian looked at Corvin. "You armed them with poison." Corvin said, "I armed them against a sovereign." The Western mercenaries reached the tree line. Some wore merchant colors. Others wore no insignia at all. At their center rode a thin man in a dark blue coat. Alara whispered, "Chancellor Darius Wren." Lucian's expression became lethal. The Royal Supply Council, the same council responsible for winter grain. Darius dismounted beyond bow range. Majesty, Lucian remained inside the doorway. "You chose an unusual way to deliver supplies." Darius smiled. "Necessary corrections rarely arrive politely." Ivy felt the final pieces locked together, the shortages. Corvin, Frostbane, the council. Darius looked at her. His attention sharpened. "So this is the Omega." Ivy hated the way he said it. Corvin answered, "She is irrelevant." Darius looked toward the silver flames. "No." His smile disappeared. "She is becoming extremely relevant." Alara whispered, "He knows." Darius lifted one hand. "Corvin, end this." Corvin's eyes moved toward Ivy, then toward the Frostpine warriors still refusing to rise. Something desperate entered him. Stand. A few wolves shifted uneasily. Your alpha commands you. Nothing. The cottage's silver fire burned brighter. Corvin's fear returned. Darius frowned. What is happening? Ivy stepped outside. Lucian caught her wrist. Do not. She looked at him. Trust me. The words affected him visibly. His hand opened. Ivy walked into the snow. Corvin stared at her. She could hear her own heartbeat. Nothing else. Not the arrows, not the soldiers, not the wind. Only the memory of an empty pantry, the last bowl of stew, a starving wolf outside her door. Corvin pointed at her. Kneel. Alpha pressure crashed across the clearing. Frostpine wolves dropped. Several mercenaries stumbled. Ivy remained upright. The force reached the invisible boundary around her cottage and died. Corvin's brow tightened. Kneel. More pressure. Ivy's knees trembled, not from command, from cold. She looked at him. No, Darius stared. Lucian stepped onto the porch. Crown Dominion rolled outward, stronger than Corvin's command. Royal soldiers lowered their heads. Mercenary shifters recoiled. Corvin dropped to one knee. Ivy still stood. Then Lucian's power weakened as it crossed the same invisible boundary, not because he lost control, because the house refused to let rank decide what happened inside it. Alara emerged, holding Ivy's mother's ladle. The carved symbol glowed silver. 3 flames. 1 house. Her voice barely carried, hearthbound. Darius went white. Corvin looked at the ladle, then Ivy. No, Alara stepped closer. The line survived. No. Corvin shook his head. Maeve was the last. Ivy stopped breathing. You knew my mother. Corvin realized too late what he had admitted. His eyes widened. Darius swore. Lucian's voice cut through the clearing. What happened to Maeve Marlow? Corvin said nothing. Darius answered. She refused. Ivy looked at him. Refused what? To help us stabilize the outer packs during the last winter crisis. Alara's face hardened. That is not what Hearthbound did. Darius laughed. History belongs to whoever keeps the archives. Lucian's expression darkened. Darius continued. Your mother believed Sanctuary should remain neutral. No Alpha Command. No Crown authority. No pack hierarchy inside its walls. Ivy looked around her tiny cottage, the chipped bowl, the cracked shutters, the roof that leaked over the pantry. Her mother had known. All along. Corvin spoke. She chose principle while wolves starved. Ivy turned toward him. And you hated her for it. My sister died that winter. The words came rough. Real. For the first time, Corvin's anger sounded less like power and more like an old wound. Maeve had stores. She had enough for children and injured wolves. She could have opened everything. And then... Corvin went silent. Ivy knew. Then everyone inside would have starved too. His pain was real, so was his cruelty. Ivy stepped toward him. I am sorry about your sister. Corvin stared at her. But grief does not give you ownership of everyone else's hunger. His face hardened. Darius shouted, Enough! He raised 2 fingers. A mercenary archer released. The arrow did not fly toward Ivy. It struck Lucian. The shaft buried shallowly beneath his shoulder. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then Lucian screamed. The sound became a wolf's roar halfway through. Alara ran. No! Lucian collapsed. Dark veins exploded beneath his skin. The original poison woke all at once. Ivy dropped beside him. Lucian. His silver eyes vanished behind black. Darius smiled. The final reservoir. Corvin stared at him. You said he would weaken. He is weakening. You said no one else would be harmed. Darius looked bored. Then keep your people away. Something inside Corvin broke, not enough to make him innocent, enough to make him realize he had never been the one controlling this. Lucian shifted violently into the black wolf. The beast struck the ground, snarling. Royal guards backed away. Elias raised his sword. Ivy stepped in front of him. No, that is not the king. Yes, it is. The beast lunged. Ivy did not move. He stopped inches from her throat. Hot breath struck her face. No recognition, only rage. Then she smelled something faint beneath pine smoke and poison. Stew. Ridiculous. Impossible. Memory did not care. Ivy looked toward the cottage. The blue bowl sat on the table. She ran inside. Darius laughed. Finally learned to run? Ivy grabbed the bowl. The pot beside the hearth still held the stew she had promised Lucian. She poured it, carried it outside, set it in the snow between herself and the giant black wolf. This was enough to bring you back once, the beast snarled. Ivy touched the bowl, then placed her palm flat against the earth. She remembered her mother's words. A hearth is not measured by how much it keeps, but by who it refuses to leave cold. Ivy opened everything. Warmth burst outward. Not fire, not light. Welcome. The clearing changed. Every growl stopped. Every dominance field collapsed. Mercenary wolves lowered their weapons. Frostpine warriors lifted their heads. Lucian froze. Corvin tried to stand. Kneel. Nothing happened. He turned toward his wolves. Obey me. Nothing. His authority still existed, but inside Ivy's sanctuary, authority could not become ownership. Ilara raised the glowing ladle. Hearthbound. Corvin's arrogance shattered. Confusion crossed his face, then recognition, then denial. No. He stared at Ivy, the Omega he had exiled, the woman he had allowed to go hungry, the person he believed could never matter because she commanded no one. Darius backed towards his horse. Corvin whispered, "You cannot be." Ivy looked at him. "I do not need you to believe me." For the first time in Ivy's life, Alpha Corvin Rusk stepped away from her, not because she could overpower him, because his power meant nothing here. Terror replaced denial. Lucian's wolf collapsed. Ivy ran to him. She pressed both hands into his fur. The frostbane poured toward her. Cold swallowed her arms, her chest, her heart. Lucian's black eyes flickered. "Come back." Nothing. Ivy pushed deeper. "You still owe me for 3 rabbits." Silver appeared. And 1 terrible apple. His wolf shuddered. "You came back every night. More silver. So come back now." The beast's forehead touched hers. The black receded. Lucian shifted. Human arms caught her. Alive. Everyone saw him. The king had returned. Corvin's conspiracy had failed. Darius was dragged from his horse by royal guards before he reached the road. Ivy should have felt victorious. Instead, she could no longer feel her fingers. Lucian looked down. Her lips were blue. Ivy? The sanctuary was still open, still pulling cold into her. Ilara rushed toward them. "Close it," Ivy tried. Nothing happened. "Close it now. I do not know how." The silver fire inside the cottage surged. Lucian grabbed her shoulders. Evie barely felt his hands. She looked toward the wolves she had protected. They were warm, calm, safe. A terrible part of her thought that should be enough. Then her knees gave way. Lucian caught her. "Ivy," she tried to smile. "You are warm." His face changed. Fear, pure and human. Ivy heard Alara shout something about core temperature. The words blurred. Lucian pulled her against his chest, but the cold inside Ivy kept spreading. For years, she had survived by giving away whatever she had: food, time, warmth, space. Now her own power was doing exactly the same thing, and Ivy suddenly understood the price. The sanctuary would keep everyone else from freezing, even if it emptied her completely. Ivy woke to the sound of someone arguing in a whisper. Her temperature is still falling. She's awake. No, she is not. I am now. The argument stopped. Ivy opened her eyes. Lucian sat beside the narrow bed, still wearing the black shirt from the clearing. A white bandage crossed one shoulder where the frostbane arrow had struck. Dr. Alara stood behind him. "You should not be conscious yet." Ivy tried to move. Cold seized every joint. She stopped. "Apparently my body agrees." Lucian leaned closer. "Do not joke. That sounds serious." "It is." Evie looked toward the hearth. The flames were ordinary again. Everyone else? "Safe," Lucian said. "Frostpine, safe. Corvin, in custody. Darius, also in custody." Ivy exhaled. Then she noticed the silence inside herself. Her wolf felt distant, too distant. "Alara, I'm here. I cannot feel her." The physician did not lie. That concerns me too. Ivy swallowed. "What happened? You opened the sanctuary beyond anything your body had done before. You absorbed frostbane instability and dominance pressure from every shifter inside the field. So I froze. You are still freezing." Lucian stood. "What does she need?" "Heat. You have blankets, not external heat." Ivy understood. No, Alara ignored her. Her body still thinks everyone around her is in danger. Ivy looked toward the window. Royal guards crossed the clearing outside. Frostpine wolves stood farther down the road. She sensed their fear and relief. The cold deepened, Alara noticed. What? You reached for them. I did nothing. You felt them. Your power answered." Ivy clenched her hands beneath the blanket. "How do I stop?" "You stop treating every frightened wolf as your responsibility." Ivy laughed weakly. "That sounds less like medicine and more like criticism." "It can be both." Lucian almost smiled. Ivy glared at him. "You are not helping." His expression softened. "Neither are you." Lucian crouched beside the bed. "You nearly died. Everyone else lived. That is not an answer. It is to me." No alpha pressure touched the room. Only human anger. You do not get to disappear inside an act of kindness and call it virtue. Ivy stared at him. "That is unfair." "Yes." She looked away. "If giving everything you have is the only way you know how to prove you deserve a place, then Corvin did more damage than exile." Her throat tightened. "That is not what I'm doing." "Then why are you asking about everyone except yourself?" Silence. She hated him for seeing it. Ivy threw back the blanket. Alara caught it. "What are you doing?" "Getting up." "No, I need air. You need circulation. My feet still exist. Barely." Ivy stood. The room tilted. Lucian reached toward her, stopped. His hand remained suspended. "May I?" Ivy nodded. Lucian supported her elbow. She made it 3 steps before the cold in her spine became unbearable. "I need to leave." Lucian went still. "Where?" "Somewhere with fewer people." Alara frowned. "Distance will not solve this." "I know." Ivy grabbed her coat. "It might help me think." She opened the door. Snow reflected hard morning light. Every head in the clearing turned. Relief, respect, guilt, curiosity. The cold sharpened. Ivy crossed the clearing while frostpine wolves lowered their eyes. One woman whispered, "Thank you." Another added, "You saved my son." Ivy walked faster until she reached the trees, teeth chattering. The forest helped. Fewer minds. Less need. Ivy reached the creek and sat on a fallen cedar. Better, a lie. The cold had moved inward. A rabbit darted beneath a bush. Ivy remembered Night dropping one at her feet. Her eyes burned. You always came back. A branch cracked behind her. Lucian stood 20 feet away. No guards. No coat. Only the bandage beneath his shirt and a covered bowl in his hands. "I told you not to follow. You told me not to come closer." She stared. "You are becoming irritatingly precise. I learned from you." He sat on a stump exactly where he was. The bowl rested in his hands. Steam curled from beneath the cloth. "What is that? Dinner. It is morning. You fed a wolf porridge at midnight. That wolf lacked manners. So does the king." She almost smiled. Lucian removed the cloth, the chipped blue bowl. Ivy froze. "What is in it? Stew. Did you cook it?" "No." "Good." Elora did. Less comforting. Lucian set the bowl between them in the snow, then moved his hands away. No demand. An offering. Ivy looked at the steam. "I am not hungry. That is a lie. Why are you doing this? Because you fed me. That was different. You were starving. So are you. Not for food." The word struck deep. "You could order me to eat." "Yes." "Why do you not?" "Because I remember what it felt like when you put food in front of me and let me decide whether to take it." Her throat tightened. "You thought I had nothing to give you," he said. "You had 3 rabbits, eventually, and 1 terrible apple." His mouth curved. "I maintain it was respectable. It was frozen. I was poisoned. That excuse is losing power." "Good." His smile faded. "You fed me when I could offer you nothing. Let me give something back." Her mother's words rose from memory. A hearth is not measured by how much it keeps, but by who it refuses to leave cold. Maybe she had misunderstood half the oath. A hearth could not keep anyone warm if it burned itself empty. She stood slowly. Lucian waited. Ivy crossed the space between them and sat opposite him. She took 1 spoonful. Warmth touched her tongue. Her body reacted almost painfully. She took another. "Stop staring." "I spent several nights being told to eat. That was different. You keep saying that, because I was right. Eat." She looked at him. He raised both hands. A request. Ivy took another spoonful. The trembling eased, only slightly. Elora appeared between the trees. Ivy groaned. "Does nobody understand privacy? I am a physician." "That answer has become very convenient." Elora crouched beside them. "The food will help your body. It will not close the sanctuary." Lucian's face hardened. "What will?" The old hearthbound records describe reciprocal warmth. Ivy immediately understood. Nor Lucian looked at her. "You do not know what she means." "Yes, I do." Elora nodded. Mate bond transfer. Lucian became still. "You just survived frostbane," Ivy said. "And your wolf is recovering. Yes, you cannot give me your core heat. I can." "Elora?" "He can." Ivy glared at her. "I did not say he should." Lucian leaned forward. "What is the cost? Your crown dominion may weaken temporarily." "How long? Hours? Days?" Possibly longer. Ivy shook her head. No, Lucian studied her. Then he said, "You gave me half your last meal. That is not comparable. You opened your home. You were dying. You carried poison out of my mind. You were dying." His voice softened. "And now you are." Evie stopped. She had wanted a gentler sentence. Lucian gave her honesty. "What if I cannot give it back? You do not have to. That is exactly the problem." "No." He moved one step closer. "The problem is that you think every gift creates debt." Ivy stared at him. "That sounds like your belief." "It was." The admission quieted her. He extended one hand. "Maybe we were wrong in opposite directions." Ivy looked at his palm. He had believed generosity was leverage. She had believed generosity was rent paid for belonging. Both had turned kindness into a transaction. "What happens if I say no?" Lucian lowered his hand. "Then we find another way." "No pressure. Choice." Ivy swallowed, then reached for him. "Ask again." His silver eyes held hers. "May I share the cold with you?" "Yes." His hand closed around hers. The mate bond opened. Warmth hit like sunlight through frozen glass. Evie gasped. Lucian did too. The cold inside her surged toward him. His fingers tightened, not trapping, holding. Ivy tried to pull away. His grip loosened instantly. She stopped. "Still here?" he asked. His breath shook. "Yes." The sanctuary reacted. The pressure inside Ivy shifted. No longer a hole swallowing heat. A bridge. Warmth moved from Lucian. Cold moved from Ivy. Neither disappeared. They shared. Lucian's face went pale. The royal pressure around him faded. Ivy felt it. "Stop." Lucian began closing the bond. Her body panicked at the returning cold. She grabbed his hand. "Wait." He froze. "I thought you said stop. I was afraid. That is allowed." She laughed weakly. "So is changing my mind?" "Yes, then stay." Lucian nodded. "I am here." The words reached somewhere food could not. The cold loosened around Ivy's heart. Then something appeared inside her. Her wolf, small, brown silver, curled beside an inner fire, not dying, resting. Across from her, Lucian's black wolf lay down. No crowding, no claim. Two creatures sharing warmth. When Ivy opened her eyes, tears clung to her lashes. Lucian wiped one away. "Better?" She listened inward. The sanctuary remained, but it no longer felt hungry. "Yes." Alara exhaled. "Good." Ivy had forgotten she was there. "You truly are terrible at privacy." "I kept you alive. Gratitude would be refreshing." Lucian looked at the physician. "My dominion? Weaker. How much?" "Enough that Commander Ward may enjoy disagreeing with you for several days." Lucian sighed. Ivy smiled. "That sounds healthy." Alara unfolded a yellowed archive page. At the top sat the same symbol carved into Maeve's ladle. 3 flames around a house. Ivy touched it. Alara read quietly. Within a hearthbound sanctuary, no crown outranks hunger. No alpha outranks safety, and no guest may take what has not been freely given. Ivy's throat tightened. Her mother had not taught her to empty herself. She had taught her to create a place where giving remained voluntary. That included Ivy. Footsteps approached. Elias emerged carrying a leather ledger. Majesty Lucian looked at him. "Tell me it is good news." Corvin confessed to the Frostbane arrangement. Ivy exhaled. "And Darius? His accounts connect the stolen Frostpine stores to 6 merchant houses." He handed Lucian the ledger. A cracked snowflake had been stamped inside the cover. Ilara's face hardened. The winter ledger. Lucian flipped through the pages. How large? Larger than Corvin. A bigger threat. Another investigation. But not today. Corvin's hold was broken. The stolen stores had been found. Lucian was alive, and warmth had returned to Ivy's hands. Lucian closed the ledger. Tomorrow. Elias blinked. Majesty, tomorrow we deal with this. Then Lucian looked at Ivy. Today she eats. Ivy raised an eyebrow. That sounded suspiciously like a command. He handed her the spoon. Would you please finish your stew? She took it. Better. Lucian sat beside her. Not above, not in front, beside. Ivy took another bite, then held the spoon toward him. Half? His expression softened. Half. For most of her life, Ivy had believed love would be proven by how much she could give away before anyone decided she was worth keeping. Sitting in the snow beside a weakened king, sharing a chipped bowl for the second time, she finally understood what her mother had meant. A true hearth did not ask one person to burn for everyone else. It kept the fire alive by letting warmth move both ways. Frostpine opened its winter storehouses before sunrise. Ivy stood beside Lucian on the ridge and watched wagons roll toward the outer settlements. Flour, salt, dried meat, medicine. Food, Corvin had claimed, did not exist. Below them, families emerged from cottages carrying baskets. No one cheered. Ivy preferred that. Hunger deserved food before speeches. Lucian's crown dominion was still weak after sharing his core warmth with her, yet when he addressed Frostpine, nobody mistook weakness for absence. Corvin Rusk will stand trial for conspiracy, unlawful deprivation of pack resources, and participation in the attempted assassination of the crown. Corvin stood under guard. For once, he looked older than powerful. Lucian continued. Chancellor Darius Wren will face the same court. A murmur passed through the gathered wolves. Then Lucian did something Ivy had not expected. Their crimes do not erase our failure. Several royal officials stiffened. Frostpine submitted 3 winter provision appeals. Lucian looked toward his own council representatives. All 3 disappeared inside a system my crown was responsible for overseeing. Silence. The corruption belonged to Darius. His gaze hardened. The responsibility for discovering it sooner belonged to us. Ivy looked at him. Kings were apparently very good at announcing victories. Lucian was learning how to announce failures. That impressed her more. Corvin lifted his head. You think reopening a storehouse fixes everything? Lucian looked at him. No. Corvin seemed surprised. You were right about one thing, Lucian said. Frostpine was neglected. The crowd shifted. You were wrong when you decided neglect gave you permission to manufacture suffering and choose whose hunger mattered. Corvin's jaw tightened. Lucian turned toward the pack. Beginning this winter, outer packs will elect their own representatives to the Provision Council. Storehouse inventories will be independently recorded, and emergency food petitions will be visible to every pack affected by them. Ivy heard Elias mutter behind them. That will make council meetings unbearable. She smiled. Good. Lucian heard her. His mouth twitched. Corvin was led away. He passed Ivy without looking at her, then stopped. My sister really did die. Ivy's anger softened without disappearing. I believe you. His eyes finally met hers. My father opened our stores too early. By deep winter, there was nothing left. There it was, the wound beneath the ideology. Ivy stepped closer. I'm sorry she died. Corvin swallowed. But But your grief explains you. Her voice remained gentle. It does not excuse you. Corvin closed his eyes. The guards led him away. Ivy watched until he disappeared. She did not feel victorious, only finished. For now. 3 days later, Lucian summoned representatives from every outer pack to the royal hall. Ivy hated the royal hall immediately. Too much marble. Too many people pretending chairs had political meaning, and entirely too many stairs. She caught her boot on the final one. Lucian caught her elbow. Every noble saw it. Ivy straightened. If anyone laughs, I am leaving. Elias coughed into his fist. Lucian looked suspiciously innocent. I heard that. I said nothing. You thought loudly. Lucian offered his hand. Ivy looked at it, then took it. Not because she needed help standing, because she wanted to. At the center of the hall stood a newly carved wooden sign, 3 flames surrounding a house. Ivy stopped. What is that? Lucian came beside her. A proposal. That word makes me nervous, as it should. Alara handed Ivy an old document. The crown once maintained 7 neutral hearth houses. Ivy read the first lines. No crown outranks hunger. No alpha outranks safety. No guest may take what has not been freely given. Her mother's oath. What happened to them? Politics, Alara said. Ivy looked at her. That sounds suspiciously like a polite word for stupidity. It often is. Lucian almost smiled. The houses disappeared when the hearthbound line was believed lost. Ivy looked toward the new symbol. And now, I want one restored. Her shoulders tightened. Lucian noticed. I said want, not command. Never. And who controls it? You. Ivy stared at him. No. Several nobles looked horrified. Lucian merely asked, Why? Because you cannot give it to me. Understanding entered his eyes. Ivy touched the old oath. If it is neutral, then it cannot belong to the crown. Lucian nodded slowly. What would you propose? A separate charter? Elias groaned quietly. Ivy ignored him. Packless wolves, omegas, injured travelers, children, even alphas can enter. She looked at Lucian. But everyone leaves rank at the door, even kings, especially kings. The hall became very quiet. Lucian smiled. Agreed. That was how Ivy Marlow became guardian of the first restored hearth house. Not because she was the Alpha King's mate, not because an ancient bloodline made her valuable, because she chose the work, and because the crown agreed that her sanctuary would never belong to it. The mate bond remained private, alive, warm, unfinished, exactly as Ivy wanted. Lucian never asked her to move into the palace. Instead, he began appearing at the hearth house for dinner, frequently, suspiciously frequently. Months later, after the first official royal banquet celebrating the restored winter provisions, Ivy escaped before dessert. She returned to her old cottage. The roof had finally been repaired. Lucian claimed this was royal infrastructure policy. Ivy claimed he was incapable of tolerating dripping water. The chipped blue bowl still sat on her shelf. She refused to replace it. Outside, snow began falling. Ivy lit the hearth. For a moment, she remembered another winter night, an empty pantry, a starving wolf, half a meal. A scratch sounded at the door. Ivy smiled before opening it. Lucian stood outside. No guards, no ceremonial coat, no crown, just Lucian. Snow rested in his black hair. You are late. I attended a banquet. So did I. You escaped? I was exercising political independence. His eyes warmed. May I come inside? Ivy stepped aside. Maybe. He entered anyway. She gasped theatrically. Royal tyranny. I will submit a written apology. Lucian looked toward the table, then the stove, then the chipped blue bowl. His expression became exactly the one Knight used to wear. Ivy folded her arms. No, I have not asked anything. You are about to. Lucian approached the table. His silver eyes moved toward the pot. Is there any stew left? Ivy laughed. There it was, the question that had begun their second meeting. Maybe all the meetings after that, too. She filled the chipped bowl. This time, the pot remained nearly full. Ivy placed the bowl between them. Lucian sat. She did not. One question had survived everything. Frostbane, Corvin, Darius, the mate bond, the hearthbound truth. All those nights when a king with an entire kingdom had crossed frozen woods to sit beside an Omega's fire, Ivy finally asked, were you really hungry every night? Lucian looked at the bowl, then at her, not for food. Her breath caught. He continued quietly. The first night, yes. A faint smile. I thought I was dying. You looked terrible. I remember your sympathy being more elegant at the time. It was not. I suspected that. His smile disappeared. The second night I came back because the Frostbane became quieter here. Ivy sat opposite him. And the third? Lucian looked toward the hearth. Because you talked to me. The fourth? You complained about your chimney for nearly an hour. It deserved criticism. The fifth? His silver eyes returned to hers. Because I realized you expected nothing from me. Ivy went still. You did not know my name, he said. My title. His fingers touched the chipped edge of the bowl. My wealth, my armies. You thought I was a starving animal that could never repay you. Ivy smiled faintly. You did eventually bring rabbits, excellent rabbits, and the apple. We agreed never to discuss the apple again. No such agreement exists. Lucian laughed. Then his expression softened. I spent my life wondering what people wanted when they approached me. He looked around the small cottage. With you, I knew. What? Nothing. The word landed gently. You gave me a place beside your fire before you knew I had anything worth taking. Ivy felt tears sting her eyes. Lucian reached across the table, stopped before touching her. Even now, may I? Ivy placed her hand in his. Yes. His fingers closed around hers. Warmth moved through the bond, balanced, shared. Ivy looked at their hands. I used to think being needed was the same thing as being loved. Lucian's thumb moved gently across her knuckles, and I thought being loved was impossible to separate from being useful. She looked at him. We were both remarkably unhealthy. I was poisoned. You cannot use that forever. I intend to try. Ivy laughed. She took the spoon, one bite for her. Then she handed it to Lucian. He ate. Same bowl, same fire, different winter. And perhaps that is the quiet truth hidden inside Ivy and Lucian's story. Generosity is beautiful. Compassion can change lives. But love should never require you to empty yourself until nothing remains. The right people do not only notice what you can give them. They notice when your hands begin to shake from carrying too much. They do not demand more. They sit beside you. They offer warmth. And when you finally learn how to receive it, they do not make you ashamed for needing it. Corvin had once believed survival required deciding whose hunger mattered most. Perhaps his grief explains how he became that man. But what do you think? Was Corvin simply cruel? Or did a real injustice slowly become an excuse for choices he knew were wrong? Tell me your answer in the comments. And if Ivy and Lucian's journey stayed with you, You can gently support the channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing so we can meet again for another story. As for the winter ledger, its remaining names would still have to be uncovered, but that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight the storehouses were open, the hungry were fed, the king was alive, and Ivy no longer had to earn her place beside anyone's fire. Outside, snow covered the road where a starving black wolf had once found her door. Inside, there was enough stew for tomorrow, and enough warmth for two people who had finally learned to share it. Wherever you are listening tonight, may your home know peace, your table know abundance, and your heart never have to prove its worth by carrying every burden alone. May you and your family be blessed with health, happiness, safety, and the comfort of people who give back the kindness you give them. And may God watch over you, protect your loved ones, and guide you safely through every winter still ahead.